At my husband Daniel's burial, I was still holding the edge of his casket when his brother Victor leaned in and whispered, "Marjorie, you need to leave. This isn't your place anymore." For a second, I thought grief had twisted his words. 33 years of marriage, and suddenly I didn't belong. Before I could answer, a long black car rolled slowly into the cemetery. Every head turned. The door opened. A woman stepped out, clutching a leather folder, her eyes fixed on mine. "Mrs. Barrett," she called gently, "your husband asked me to come. If anything happened to him." And just like that, the man I buried began speaking again. "If this moment stirred something in you, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? Please, like and subscribe. If stories about truth, family, and quiet strength matter to you, and I need to ask, what would you have done if someone told you to leave your own husband's burial?" I wish I could tell you that the moment that woman stepped out of that black car, everything suddenly made sense. It didn't. It only made the ground beneath my feet feel less certain than it already was. My name is Marjorie Barrett. I'm 61 years old, and until 3 days ago, I had been married to Daniel Barrett for 33 years. We lived a quiet life in Savannah, Georgia, a place where people still wave from their porches and remember what you brought to the church potluck 10 years ago. Daniel used to say that was enough for him. A steady business, a warm home, and someone to come back to at the end of the day. We never had children. It wasn't by choice at first, but over time it became something we learned to live around instead of through. We built our own kind of family, neighbors, friends, the crew from Daniel's construction company who'd stop by on Sundays, boots still dusty, laughing too loud in our kitchen. Daniel was a good man. Not perfect, but steady. He didn't talk much when something weighed on him, but he showed up. Every day, every storm, every quiet evening when the world felt too big and too loud. He built things with his hands, houses, decks, sometimes entire lives for people starting over. And I always believed there was nothing he couldn't fix, until the day he couldn't fix himself. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Nothing special about it. I remember because I was folding laundry in the living room, and the sunlight was coming through the window just right, warming the back of the couch where Daniel liked to nap. He came in from outside slower than usual. I noticed that first. "Danny?" I asked without looking up right away. He didn't answer. When I turned, he was standing there with one hand pressed against his chest. "I think something's wrong," he said. Those were the last full words I ever heard him speak. The next few hours blurred together into sirens, hospital lights, and the cold metallic smell of fear. They rushed him back before I could even finish answering the nurse's questions. I sat alone in a waiting room that felt too bright, too quiet, too wrong. People came and went. Time stopped meaning anything. A doctor finally came out, her face already carrying the answer before she said it. "Mrs. Barrett, we did everything we could." That's the moment my life split into before and after. I remember signing papers I didn't read, answering questions I didn't fully understand, and somewhere in the middle of all that, Victor arrived. Victor Barrett, Daniel's older brother. If you've ever met someone who walks into a room and immediately takes up more space than they were given, that's Victor. He was always like that. Taller than Daniel, louder, sharper in the way he spoke. Where Daniel built things, Victor controlled them. From the beginning, he never quite approved of me. He never said it outright, not in front of Daniel, but there were always small things. The way he'd introduce me as Daniel's wife instead of using my name. The way he'd talk about family matters like I was standing just outside a door I wasn't allowed to open. After Daniel died, Victor didn't just show up, he took over. "I'll handle the arrangements," he said, already pulling out his phone. "I can call the funeral home," I told him softly. "It's already done," he cut in. "You don't need to worry about any of that right now, Marjorie. At the time, I thought he was helping. Grief does that to you. It makes you hand over pieces of yourself just to get through the next hour." I was so busy trying to remember how to breathe without Daniel that I didn't notice how quickly everything else was being taken out of my hands. Victor spoke to the hospital staff. He answered calls from people I hadn't even had the strength to notify yet. He coordinated the burial, chose the plot one I had never seen before, and set the service time. I remember asking him quietly, "Shouldn't we talk about this together?" He gave me a look I couldn't quite place at the time. Not anger, not sympathy either. Something colder. "Daniel wouldn't want you overwhelmed," he said. "Trust me. This is what's best. Trust me." It's strange how those two words can sound like comfort, until they don't. There were other things too, small moments that didn't settle right even then. At the funeral home the day before the burial, a man in a dark suit approached me with a folder. "Mrs. Barrett," he said gently. "There are a few documents." Victor stepped in before I could respond. "She's not signing anything today," he said firmly, placing a hand on my shoulder as if to steady me. "She's in no condition." I remember feeling almost grateful in that moment. I was exhausted, numb, barely able to process what day it was. The idea of reading legal documents felt impossible, but later that night, lying alone in our bed for the first time in over 3 decades, something about that moment came back to me. Not what Victor said, how quickly he said it, like he'd been waiting. I also noticed something else when I returned home from the hospital that first night. Daniel's study door was slightly open. That might not sound like much, but my husband was a creature of habit. He kept that door closed when he wasn't inside. Always. Said it helped him leave work at work, even when the office was just down the hall. I pushed the door open slowly. At first glance, everything looked normal. Desk in place, papers stacked, his old leather chair pushed in. But something felt off. I couldn't name it then. I didn't walk further into the room. I told myself I was imagining things, that grief was playing tricks on me, so I closed the door again. And I didn't go back in. Not that night, not the next day, not even the morning of the burial. Because every part of me was focused on one thing: saying goodbye to the man I loved. Which is why, standing there at the cemetery hearing Victor tell me to leave, tell me I didn't belong, I felt something inside me fracture in a way grief alone hadn't managed to do. It wasn't just cruel, it was deliberate. And now, with that black car sitting behind us, and that woman Caroline Hayes holding a folder my husband had prepared before he died, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think until that exact moment. Daniel's death might not have been as simple as everyone said. And worse than that, he had known something was coming. I didn't remember walking toward her. One moment I was standing beside Daniel's grave, the next, I was halfway across the grass, my hands trembling, my heart pounding in a way grief alone couldn't explain. The woman waited for me. She didn't rush, didn't look around for approval. And most importantly, she didn't look at Victor. That was the first thing that told me she wasn't afraid of him. "Mrs. Barrett," she said again, softer this time as I approached. "My name is Caroline Hayes." Up close, I could see she was composed in a way that didn't belong at a burial. Not cold, but focused. Intentional. Like she had come here for a purpose and had no intention of leaving without fulfilling it. "I'm sorry," I managed to say, though I didn't know what I was apologizing for. "Do I know you know?" she replied. "But your husband knew me." Behind me, I could feel Victor closing the distance. "This is not the time or place," he said sharply. Whatever business you think you have, you can take it somewhere else. Caroline didn't even turn. That won't be possible, she said calmly. Mr. Barrett was very specific about where and when I was to speak to his wife. That word specific hung in the air like a warning. Victor stepped closer, his voice dropping tighter now. Daniel is dead. Any arrangements go through me. That's when she finally looked at him, and for the first time since I'd known Victor, I saw something unexpected flicker across his face. Not anger, not control, but uncertainty. With respect, Caroline said, her tone still even, "My instructions do not involve you." A murmur rippled quietly through the small group of people still lingering near the gravesite. I could feel eyes on us, hear the soft shifting of feet on damp grass. This was no longer just a private moment of grief, it was turning into something else. Something public, something dangerous. Caroline turned back to me. "Mrs. Barrett," she said, and this time her voice carried a weight that made my stomach tighten. "Your husband retained me approximately 6 months ago. He asked me to hold certain documents and to deliver a message to you. In the event of his unexpected death." Unexpected. That word hit harder than anything else. He was fine, I said, my voice shaking. He wasn't sick. This just happened. "I understand," she said gently. "And I'm very sorry for your loss. But your husband anticipated a situation in which he might not be able to speak for himself." Behind me, Victor let out a short, dismissive breath. "This is absurd," he said. "Daniel wouldn't hide things from his own family." Caroline's eyes flicked to him briefly. "He didn't," she replied. "He entrusted them to the person he believed needed protection." Something inside me shifted at that word. Protection. From what? From who? She reached into her leather folder and withdrew a sealed envelope. My name was written on the front in Daniel's handwriting. There was no mistaking it. I'd seen that handwriting on grocery lists, birthday cards, little notes left on the kitchen counter when he had to leave early for a job. The sight of it now neat, steady, familiar felt like a hand reaching out from somewhere I couldn't follow. My fingers hesitated before taking it. For a second, I didn't want to open it, because once I did, whatever was inside would be real. "Go ahead," Caroline said quietly. I broke the seal. The paper inside was folded once. My hands shook so badly I had to steady it against my palm just to read. "Marjorie, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong faster than I expected." That first line alone made my breath catch. I forced myself to keep going. "If Victor is the one handling things, do not go home alone. Do not sign anything he puts in front of you. Trust Caroline. She knows what to do. I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything sooner. I thought I could fix it before it reached you. I love you." Daniel. The world seemed to tilt. I read it again and again, each time hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less terrifying. They didn't. Do not go home alone. Do not sign anything. Trust Caroline. My husband hadn't just prepared for his death. He had prepared for what would happen after it. My hands dropped to my sides, the letter still clutched between my fingers. I turned slowly. Victor was watching me, not with concern, not with grief, but with calculation. "What does it say?" he asked. His tone was controlled, but there was an edge beneath it now, something sharper than before. I swallowed my throat dry. It's from Daniel. I can see that he snapped." "What does it say, Marjorie?" Caroline stepped slightly closer to me, not enough to be obvious, but enough that I felt it. A quiet presence. A barrier. It's private, she said before I could answer. Victor's jaw tightened. Nothing about this is private. This is a family matter. I don't know where the strength came from. Maybe it was the way Daniel's words still echoed in my mind. Maybe it was the way Victor said family like I didn't belong to it. Or maybe it was the first flicker of something breaking through the fog of grief. No, I said. The word surprised even me. Victor blinked. What I said, no. I repeated, my voice steadier this time. It's from my husband. To me. Silence fell between us. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was heavy. For the first time since Daniel died, I wasn't following Victor's lead, and he knew it. You're not thinking clearly, he said after a moment, lowering his voice again, trying a different approach. You've been through a shock. People can take advantage of that. His eyes flicked briefly toward Caroline. That's exactly what Daniel warned me about, I said. The moment the words left my mouth, I saw it. That flash again. That crack in Victor's control. It was small, but it was there. And suddenly the cemetery didn't feel like a place of closure anymore. It felt like the beginning of something Daniel had tried and failed to finish himself. Caroline spoke quietly beside me. Mrs. Barrett, we shouldn't stay here. I nodded before I could second-guess myself. Victor stepped forward. You're not going anywhere with her. I looked at him. Really looked at him. Not as Daniel's older brother, not as someone who had taken charge when I couldn't, but as the man my husband had warned me about. I think I am, I said, and just like that, I stepped away from the grave. Away from Victor. Away from the version of my life that had ended 3 days ago. As I walked toward that black car, Daniel's letter still trembling in my hand, one thought settled in my chest with a cold, undeniable weight. My husband hadn't just died. He had left me a warning, and I was only beginning to understand why. I had never left a burial before the last handful of dirt was placed. In Savannah, you stayed. You waited. You watched the casket lower. You listened to the final prayer, and you stood there no matter how much it hurt, because that was what love looked like at the end. But that day, I walked away. I didn't look back at Daniel's grave. I couldn't. If I had, I might have turned around, apologized to Victor, and folded myself back into the quiet obedience I had lived in for far too long without realizing it. Instead, I followed Caroline Hayes across the gravel path and into that long black car. The door closed behind me with a soft, final sound that felt louder than it should have. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The driver pulled away slowly, the cemetery shrinking in the rearview mirror. I watched it until I couldn't anymore. Until Daniel's grave was gone. My fingers were still wrapped around the letter. I hadn't realized how tightly until Caroline gently said, "You can let go a little. It's not going anywhere." I looked down. My knuckles were pale, the paper slightly crumpled where I'd been holding it. "I don't understand," I whispered. "He never told me anything. Not about you. Not about any of this." "I know," she said softly, "and he struggled with that more than you might realize." I turned to her, my chest tightening. "Then why didn't he tell me? We told each other everything." Caroline didn't answer right away. She seemed to choose her words carefully, which only made the silence heavier. "Your husband believed he could resolve the situation before it reached you," she said at last. "He was wrong about that, but his intention was to protect you, not to shut you out. Protect me." That word again. From what I asked. Caroline held my gaze. From someone who had already begun positioning himself to take control of everything Daniel owned. I didn't need her to say the name. Victor. My stomach turned. The car turned onto a quieter street, lined with low office buildings and old oak trees draped in Spanish moss. Savannah had a way of making even ordinary places feel like they were holding on to secrets. We pulled into a small parking lot beside a brick building that looked more like a converted home than an office. "Where are we?" I asked. "A colleague's space," Caroline said. "I didn't want to risk being seen walking you into a firm downtown, not yet. Not yet." That didn't sit well. Inside the office was quiet, clean, and faintly smelled of coffee and paper. Caroline led me into a small conference room and closed the door behind us. For the first time since Daniel died, I sat down at a table and realized how tired I truly was. Not just physically, but in a way that reached deeper than that. Caroline placed her leather folder on the table and opened it. "I'm going to show you some things," she said. "They may be difficult to process. If at any point you need to stop, we can." "I don't think I can stop anymore," I said. My voice surprised me. It didn't shake. It didn't break. It just held. She nodded once, then slid the first document toward me. It was a property transfer form. Our address sat at the top of the page. My home. Daniel's name was printed clearly in the designated space, and beneath it his signature. Except I stared at it longer than I needed to, long enough for something inside me to tighten. "That's not right," I said quietly. Caroline didn't react, but I saw a flicker of acknowledgement in her eyes. "What makes you say that I've seen him sign his name for 33 years, I said. "That looks like him, but it's not how he writes when he's certain. When Daniel was sure of something, his signature was clean, confident. This?" I leaned closer. "It's heavier. Like he hesitated. Or someone tried to copy the motion instead of the meaning." Caroline folded her hands lightly on the table. "That aligns with what I suspected." A second document slid toward me, then a third, each one tied to something we owned. A storage property Daniel had used for equipment, a business account, a small piece of land on the edge of town we had talked about selling someday, maybe if we needed to, all bearing Daniel's name, all carrying signatures that felt wrong. Not completely false, but not completely true. My chest tightened with each page. He wouldn't do this without telling me I said. He wouldn't sign anything like this without talking to me first. "I believe you," Caroline said. "So, how?" "He either signed under pressure," she said evenly, "or someone is attempting to replicate his authorization." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. "And you think Victor is behind this?" It wasn't a question. Caroline met my eyes. "Your husband believed that to be the case." I sat back slowly, my hands resting in my lap, now empty. The letter lay on the table between us. "I keep thinking about what he wrote," I said. "Don't go home alone. Don't sign anything. Trust you." I looked up at her. "He knew something was going to happen, didn't he?" Caroline exhaled quietly. "He believed the situation was escalating. He came to me because he was concerned that his refusal to cooperate would lead to consequences. Consequences like what?" She hesitated, and that hesitation told me more than any immediate answer could have. "Financial manipulation at minimum," she said carefully. "Possibly coercion." And more, I pressed. Her eyes held mine. "I didn't have evidence of anything beyond that at the time," she said, "but your husband was uneasy. In a way that suggested he feared losing control not just of his assets, but of what might happen to you if he did." My throat tightened. "He should have told me," I whispered. "He should have," she agreed gently. But he believed he had time. Time. That was the one thing none of us ever actually had. I stared down at the documents again, at the signatures that looked like Daniel but not quite, at the pieces of our life being moved, reshaped, redirected without my knowledge. This started before he died, I said slowly. Yes. How long? Months, at least. I closed my eyes briefly. Months. All those dinners, all those quiet evenings where Daniel sat across from me saying nothing was wrong, all those moments where I thought I knew the man I had built my life with, and somehow underneath all of it something had already begun to unravel. I need to go home, I said suddenly. Caroline's expression sharpened. Marjorie, I need to see it, I insisted. His office, his things. I need to know what he left behind. She studied me for a moment, weighing something. Then she nodded. We won't go alone, she said. Of course. Don't go home alone. Daniel's words echoed again louder this time. As we gathered the documents and prepared to leave, one thought settled into place with quiet, terrifying clarity. Whatever Daniel had tried to stop, whatever Victor had already set in motion, it hadn't ended with Daniel's death. It had just begun to reach me. I had never been afraid of my own home before. Not in all the years Daniel and I lived there. Not during storms that rattled the windows or nights when the power went out and the whole neighborhood went dark. That house had always felt like the safest place in the world to me because he was in it. Now, as Caroline's car turned onto our street, something in my chest tightened. The house looked exactly the same. White siding, front porch with the swing Daniel built himself one summer when the heat was so bad we slept with every window open. The oak tree out front still cast that familiar patch of shade across the yard. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. Caroline didn't pull into the driveway right away. Instead, she parked along the curb a few houses down. We'll wait a moment, she said. For what? I asked, my eyes fixed on the front door. For confirmation that no one is inside, she replied. My heart skipped. You think someone might be in there? I think your husband warned you not to come home alone for a reason, she said carefully. Until we're certain, we proceed cautiously. I swallowed. For 33 years, I had walked through that door without a second thought. Now I was sitting outside, afraid to cross the lawn. Caroline made a call. Her voice stayed low, controlled. She mentioned a name, Officer Collins, and gave our address. I didn't catch every word, but I understood enough. She wasn't taking chances. We waited in silence for about 10 minutes, though it felt longer. When the patrol car finally turned onto the street, I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Officer Grant Collins stepped out. Mid-40s, steady presence, the kind of man who didn't rush but didn't miss anything either. He nodded to Caroline, then glanced at me with a softer expression. Mrs. Barrett, he said, I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, I replied, though the words felt thin. Caroline explained the situation briefly without revealing everything but enough to justify caution. Officer Collins listened, then nodded. Let's take a look, he said. We approached the house together. Each step up the walkway felt heavier than the last. I reached the front door and paused, my hand hovering over the knob. This was ridiculous, I told myself. This was my house. I pushed the door open. The familiar scent hit me first, wood polish. Faint coffee, the lingering trace of Daniel's cologne that still clung to the hallway like a memory that refused to fade. Nothing seemed disturbed. The living room was exactly as I had left it the morning Daniel collapsed. A folded blanket on the couch, a magazine on the side table, his reading glasses resting beside it. Everything looked normal. But the feeling in my chest didn't ease. Stay here a moment, Officer Collins said gently. He stepped inside first. moving through the rooms with quiet efficiency. Caroline stayed close to me, her presence steady grounding. After a few minutes, he returned. "No sign of forced entry," he said. "No one inside." I nodded, though something still felt off. "Thank you," Caroline said. "We'll take it from here." He gave me one last look, measured, concerned, before heading back out. The door closed behind him, and suddenly the house felt too quiet. I stepped inside slowly. Every sound seemed louder than it should have been: the creak of the floorboards, the soft rustle of my own clothing, even my breathing. I moved toward the hallway, toward Daniel's study. The door was closed now. That stopped me. I was certain, absolutely certain, that when I left for the hospital 3 nights ago, it had been slightly open. I looked at Caroline. She saw it too. "You didn't close it?" she asked. "No." She nodded once. "Go ahead." My hand trembled as I reached for the handle. I turned it slowly and pushed the door open. At first glance, everything seemed in place. Desk, chair, shelves lined with binders and tools, but the longer I stood there, the more the details began to shift. The desk drawer was not fully aligned. It sat just a fraction open, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. A stack of papers on the right side leaned at an angle Daniel would never have allowed. His chair was pushed in too far, too perfectly, like someone had tried to make it look untouched. "He was here," I whispered. Caroline stepped beside me. "Who, Victor?" I walked further into the room now, my pulse quickening. "This isn't how Daniel left things," I said. "He kept this place precise, organized in his own way, but not like this." I moved to the desk and pulled the drawer open. Inside, folders had been rearranged. Some were slightly out of order, edges misaligned. I reached into the back. Empty. My breath caught. "There used to be a small lockbox here," I said. "Daniel kept personal documents in it." "Is it anywhere else in the room?" Caroline asked. "No," I said immediately. "He never moved it." We both understood what that meant. Someone had taken it. And not just anyone. Someone who knew it was there. I straightened slowly, my hands bracing against the edge of the desk. "He came here," I said. "Before the funeral. Maybe even before I got back from the hospital." Caroline's expression hardened slightly. "It would explain the urgency we've seen." I shook my head, trying to piece it together. "But why take that and leave everything else?" I murmured. "Because he was looking for something specific," she said. "And either he found it, or he didn't." That thought sent a chill down my spine. If Victor had found what he was looking for, what was left? And if he hadn't, was it still here? I forced myself to keep looking, not just at the obvious places, but at the places only Daniel would think to use. I knelt beside the desk and ran my fingers along the underside. Nothing. I checked the bookshelf, running my hand along the back panels. Still nothing. Then I paused. There was one place I hadn't looked. The bottom drawer. It slid open smoothly. At first, it appeared empty except for a few old notebooks, but something about the base felt wrong. Too solid. Too thick. I pressed down lightly. A faint, hollow sound answered. My breath caught. "Caroline," I said quietly. She moved closer. "There's something under this." Carefully, I lifted the thin lining at the bottom of the drawer, and beneath it, hidden where no one would think to look unless they knew exactly what they were searching for, was a small flash drive and a narrow, worn notebook. For a moment, neither of us spoke. because we both understood the same thing at the exact same time. Victor had searched this room, but he hadn't found everything. I reached for the notebook first. My hands were shaking again, but not from grief this time. From something sharper, something clearer. Fear. And the growing realization that whatever Daniel had been trying to protect me from was no longer hidden. It was waiting, right here. For a long moment, I didn't touch either of them. The flash drive sat there like something small and harmless, the kind of thing Daniel used to keep tucked into his pocket when he had to bring files home from a job site. The notebook looked older, creased along the spine edges, worn as if it had been opened and closed too many times in too many quiet moments, and yet together they felt heavier than anything I had held since Daniel died. "Go ahead," Caroline said gently. I nodded, though my throat had gone dry. I picked up the notebook first. The cover was plain, no label, no title. Just Daniel's careful handwriting on the inside flap, his initials D, B, written the way he always did, neat and grounded as if each letter had somewhere important to be. I flipped it open. The first few pages were blank. Then halfway down the writing began. Not full sentences at first. Fragments, dates, numbers. Short lines that looked more like reminders than explanations. March 14th. Victor pushed again about the South parcel. April 2nd. Said Marjorie doesn't need to be involved. April 18th. Bank call. Something didn't match. I felt my chest tighten. "Keep going," Caroline said softly. I turned another page. The entries became more detailed. May 3rd, Victor brought papers. Said it was routine. Didn't feel right. Refused to sign. May 10th. He came back. Different tone this time. Said I was being difficult. June 1st found discrepancy in account. Asked questions. He avoided them. I swallowed hard. Each line felt like a step I hadn't seen Daniel take. A path he had walked alone while sitting across from me at dinner while watching television beside me, while telling me everything was fine. Why didn't he tell me I whispered? Caroline didn't answer right away. "He may have believed he was shielding you," she said quietly, "or that he could resolve it without dragging you into it." I shook my head slightly, eyes still on the page. "He should have trusted me with it," I said. "We were supposed to face things together, and yet she said he still made sure you would have this if something went wrong." That stopped me. I turned another page. The handwriting had changed. Not in style, but in pressure. The lines were darker now, the strokes heavier as if the pen had pressed harder against the paper. July 12th. Victor said, if I don't cooperate, he'll make things complicated for Marjorie. My breath caught. There it was. My name. Written in Daniel's hand. Written in a moment I had never known existed. What does that mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Caroline leaned slightly closer, reading over my shoulder. It suggests he was using you as leverage. I stared at the words. Make things complicated for Marjorie. My stomach turned. I flipped to the next page. July 20th. He mentioned the will. Said it's time to correct things. August 3rd. I told him no again. He didn't take it well. August 15th. Something feels off. Need to be careful. The entries were getting closer together now, more frequent, more urgent. September 2nd. Drink tasted strange tonight. Probably nothing. Still, uneasy. My hand froze on the page. Caroline noticed immediately. "What is it?" I turned the notebook slightly so she could read. Her expression shifted. "That aligns with what the nurse mentioned," she said. The comment about something tasting off. I didn't respond, because my mind had already moved ahead. To the next page. September 3rd. Not feeling right. Chest tight. Could be stress. Or not. September 4th. If something happens, Caroline has everything. And then the final entry. No date. Just one line. If I can't fix this, Marjorie needs to be protected. The words blurred. I blinked hard, but the tears came anyway. This wasn't just a record. It was a timeline. A quiet, private account of everything Daniel had been carrying without me. Every warning sign. Every moment of pressure. Every decision to stand his ground. And every step closer to something he hadn't been able to stop. I didn't see any of this. I said, my voice breaking now. I was right there and I didn't see it. Caroline's voice softened. You trusted him. That's not a failure, Marjorie. That's what marriage is. I closed the notebook slowly, my hands trembling. Then I reached for the flash drive. This is everything else I asked. Most likely, she said. Digital copies records anything he didn't want easily found. We moved to Daniel's computer. It felt strange sitting in his chair, like I was stepping into a place that still belonged to him. Caroline inserted the flash drive and waited. A folder appeared. Simple. No attempt to disguise it. Just labeled C. For Caroline, I said quietly. She nodded once. We opened it. Inside were several files, scanned documents, bank statements, property records, and one audio file. Caroline hesitated for a fraction of a second before clicking it. The sound crackled briefly. Then Daniel's voice filled the room, low, tired, but unmistakably his. I'm not signing anything like that, Victor. Not without going over it properly. A pause. Then Victor's voice, clearer than I expected, sharper. You're overthinking it, Daniel. It's a formality. That land belongs with the family. It is with the family, Daniel replied. Marjorie is my family. Another pause. Longer this time. When Victor spoke again, his tone had changed. Less persuasive. More cold. You always were sentimental, he said. That's your problem. And this, Daniel began. No, Victor cut in. This is your problem. You're making things harder than they need to be. I said no. The silence that followed felt different, heavier. And then Victor again, quieter, but far more dangerous. You keep saying no, he said, but you won't be around forever to keep saying it. My entire body went still. The air in the room seemed to disappear. Daniel didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was tighter. What's that supposed to mean? Victor let out a short breath. It means you should start thinking about what happens after you're gone. A pause. Then the line that made my hands go numb. Because once you're gone, she won't fight. The recording ended. Just like that. No resolution. No raised voices. Just that sentence. Hanging in the silence. I stared at the screen, unable to move. Unable to breathe properly, he said that I whispered. Caroline didn't speak immediately. She didn't need to. We had both heard it. Clear as anything. That wasn't just about money, I said slowly. That was a plan. Caroline nodded. Yes. I looked down at the notebook, at Daniel's final words. If I can't fix this, Marjorie needs to be protected. And for the first time since his death, something inside me shifted completely. Grief didn't disappear. It never would. But it was no longer the only thing I felt. Now there was something else. Something sharper. Something steadier. Understanding. Daniel hadn't been distant. He hadn't been hiding things out of indifference. He had been fighting something I didn't even know existed, and he had lost. But he had made sure I wouldn't. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. I lay in our bed, my bed now, I suppose staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet creaks of a house that suddenly felt too large for one person. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Victor's voice again. Once you're gone, she won't fight. I turned onto Daniel's side of the bed without thinking. His pillow still held the faintest trace of him, and that almost broke me more than anything else. But something inside me had changed. Grief was still there, deep and aching, but it was no longer blinding me. Now I could see. And what I saw terrified me. By morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold, the notebook and flash drive laid out in front of me like evidence in a case I never asked to be part of. Caroline arrived just after 9. She didn't knock right away. I watched her from the window as she stood on the porch for a moment, scanning the street, the yard, the surroundings. Careful, always careful. When I opened the door, she gave me a small, assessing look. You didn't sleep, she said. No, I replied. She nodded as if that confirmed something she already expected. That's understandable. I stepped aside to let her in. The house felt different in daylight. Less threatening, perhaps, but not safe. Not anymore. We sat at the table together. I've already started making calls, Caroline said, setting her folder down. The first step is to limit Victor's access to anything he might try to move or alter quickly. He already tried, I said. At the funeral home. She looked at me. Tell me exactly what happened. I took a breath, forcing myself to go back. There was a man there, I said. A staff member. He approached me with a folder, said there were documents that needed my signature. Caroline leaned slightly forward. Did you see what they were? No. Victor stepped in before I could even take them. He said I wasn't in a condition to sign anything. And how did that feel at the time, she asked. Like he was helping, I admitted. I wasn't thinking clearly. I thought he was protecting me from making mistakes. Caroline's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened. And now she asked, now it feels like he was stopping me from seeing something I wasn't supposed to see, I said. She nodded once. That's consistent with the pattern we're seeing. Pattern. The word made this feel larger, more structured, more intentional, not random, not grief-clouded confusion. A plan. Caroline opened her folder and slid a document across the table. This was filed yesterday morning, she said. I looked down. It was a preliminary transfer authorization. My name appeared at the top. So did Daniel's. And Victor's. He's already started the process, I said quietly. Yes, she replied. And he's moving quickly. That suggests urgency. Because of the land, I asked. Possibly, she said. Or because he knows there's a window before you understand what's happening where he has the advantage. I sat back, my hands curling into my lap. He thinks I won't fight, I said. Caroline met my gaze. Then we prove him wrong. The words settled into me, not loudly, but firmly. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Both of us froze. It wasn't loud, but it was unexpected. Caroline's eyes moved toward the hallway. Were you expecting anyone? No. She stood slowly. "Stay here." But I was already rising. "I'm not hiding in my own house," I said, though my voice wasn't as steady as I wanted it to be. We moved toward the door together. Caroline stayed slightly to the side as I opened it. For a brief second, I braced myself for Victor, but it wasn't him. It was a woman, mid-30s, maybe younger. Dark hair pulled back tightly. Her eyes moved quickly, nervous, uncertain. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I shouldn't have come like this. Can I help you?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "I'm Lily," she said. "Lily Barrett." The name hit me instantly. Victor's daughter. I had seen her at family gatherings over the years. Quiet. Polite. Always a little distant. She looked different now. Tense. Uneasy. "What are you doing here?" I asked my guard, rising. "I need to talk to you," she said quickly. "But not here. Not out in the open." Caroline stepped forward slightly. "We can talk inside," she said calmly. Lily's eyes flicked to her. "Who are you?" "Caroline Hayes," she replied. "I'm working with Mrs. Barrett." Lily seemed to process that for a moment. Then she nodded. "Okay." We stepped aside and let her in. The moment the door closed, she turned to me. "I wasn't sure if I should come," she said. I almost didn't. "Why did you?" I asked. She swallowed. "Because I heard what my dad said at the cemetery," she said. "And I saw the way you looked at him." Something in my chest tightened. "What do you want, Lily?" I asked gently. She took a breath. Then another, like she was bracing herself. "There's something you need to know," she said. Caroline and I exchanged a glance. "About Daniel," Lily added. The room seemed to go quieter. "What about him?" I asked. Her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together. "The night he came over for dinner," she said slowly. "A few days before he died." I felt my pulse quicken. "Yes," I said. She looked at me then. Really looked. And what I saw in her eyes wasn't just fear. It was guilt. "I think my dad did something to his drink," she said. The words landed between us like something fragile and dangerous. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely steady. I didn't understand it at the time, she rushed on. I thought maybe I was imagining things. But now, with everything that's happening, she shook her head. "I saw him switch the glasses," she said. "Right before dinner." He thought no one was looking. Caroline's posture shifted instantly, alert, focused. "Are you certain?" she asked. Lily nodded, tears forming now. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't." I felt the room tilt slightly. The notebook. The line about the drink tasting strange. The hospital. The sudden collapse. All of it began to align in a way I didn't want to believe. "But why didn't you say anything?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She looked down. "Because he's my father," she said, "and I was afraid of what it would mean if I was right." Silence filled the space between us. Heavy. Unavoidable. And now Caroline asked. Lily lifted her head slowly. "Now I think something really happened," she said, "and if I stay quiet, I'm part of it." I closed my eyes briefly. Daniel's voice echoed in my memory. "If I can't fix this, Marjorie needs to be protected." He had known, or at least suspected. And now I wasn't just dealing with forged documents or stolen property. I was standing at the edge of something far worse. I opened my eyes and looked at Lily. "Are you willing to say this again?" I asked carefully, if it comes to that. Her lips trembled, but she nodded. "Yes." Caroline stepped in gently. Then we move forward carefully, she said, because what you're describing isn't just a civil matter anymore. No, it wasn't. I looked down at the table at Daniel's notebook, his final entry still fresh in my mind. He had tried to protect me, but now it was my turn to face what he couldn't. And for the first time since he died, I understood something with complete clarity. Victor hadn't just planned to take everything from me. He had already taken the one thing I could never get back. For a while after Lily spoke, none of us moved. The air in my kitchen felt thick, as if the walls themselves were trying to hold in what had just been said. I stared at her, trying to reconcile the quiet young woman I remembered from holidays with the one standing in front of me, now shaking, pale but determined. "I need you to walk me through that night," Caroline said gently, her tone shifting into something more focused, more deliberate. "Everything you remember. Start from the beginning." Lily nodded, though her hands were still trembling. "It was supposed to be a normal dinner," she began. "Dad said he wanted to clear the air with Uncle Daniel. He told me to set the table like we were having company. Nothing unusual. I could picture it. Victor's dining room. Too formal for everyday use, but always ready to impress. Polished wood, neatly placed plates, glasses aligned just so. Daniel didn't want to go," I said quietly, more to myself than anyone else. "He told me it felt unnecessary." Lily looked at me. "He wasn't wrong." She swallowed and continued. "Dad was overly nice that night. You know how he is, when he's trying too hard." She gave a faint, humorless breath. It didn't feel real. That matched what I remembered. Victor had greeted Daniel at the door with a firm handshake, a smile that showed too many teeth. I had brushed it off at the time, thinking maybe he was finally trying to make peace. Now it felt staged. I went into the kitchen to finish bringing things out, Lily said. Dad was already there. He had the drinks poured. 3 glasses, 1 for each of us. She paused, her eyes unfocused as she reached back into the memory. "I remember because the ice was already melting. That means they'd been sitting there for a minute." Caroline nodded slightly. "Take your time." I picked up the tray. Lily continued. "But then Dad stopped me. Said he'd carry them himself." My chest tightened. "That's not like him," I said. "No." Lily agreed. "It's not." She took a breath, steadied herself. He turned away from me for just a second. Not long, but long enough. Long enough for what Caroline asked. Lily's voice dropped. For him to switch something. Silence followed. Not the kind that leaves space, the kind that closes in. I didn't see him pour anything, Lily added quickly, or add anything, but I saw him move 1 glass aside, and then put it back in a different position. She looked at me, her eyes wide with the weight of it. I didn't think about it at the time. I told myself I was overthinking. But now, her voice broke slightly. Now I can't unsee it. I pressed my hands against the edge of the table to steady myself. "Which glass did Daniel take?" I asked. "The one Dad handed him," she said immediately. "Of course. Victor wouldn't leave that to chance." "What happened after that?" Caroline asked. Lily exhaled slowly. "Dinner went on like normal, or at least it looked normal. Dad kept steering the conversation back to business, to the land, to keeping things in the family." That phrase again. Keeping things in the family, as if I had never been part of it. Daniel stayed calm, she said, but I could tell he was getting tired of it. He kept saying he wasn't interested, that things were fine the way they were. I could hear his voice in my head, firm, quiet, unmoving. "He didn't drink much," Lily added. "Just a few sips at first." My heart sank. And then he started looking off, she said. Not right away, but maybe halfway through dinner. What do you mean by off? Caroline asked. He got quieter, Lily said. More than usual. His hand went to his chest once like he was uncomfortable. I asked if he was okay and he said it was just stress. That was Daniel, minimizing everything, even when it mattered. Did your father notice? Caroline asked. Lily hesitated. Yes, she said. He noticed, but he didn't react the way you'd expect. How so? He didn't seem worried, Lily said. He just watched him. A chill ran through me. Watched him, like he was waiting for something. After dinner, Daniel left pretty quickly. Lily continued. He said he had an early morning. Dad didn't try to stop him. I closed my eyes for a moment. I remembered that part. Daniel coming home. Pale. Quiet. He had sat down on the couch, pressing his hand lightly against his chest. You all right? I had asked. Just tired, he said. Just tired. I should have insisted we go to the hospital, I whispered. Caroline's voice was steady. You didn't have the information you have now, but that didn't make it easier to accept. I didn't think it was anything serious, I said. He's had stress before. Long days, big jobs. I thought it would pass. Lily looked down, her voice barely audible now. I didn't sleep that night, she said. I kept thinking about the way Dad moved that glass, but I told myself it didn't mean anything. And the next day, Caroline asked. I heard about Daniel collapsing, she said. Dad got the call first. He didn't tell me right away. I overheard him on the phone. What did he say? Caroline pressed. Lily hesitated again. He said, that was faster than I expected. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my breath catch my chest tightening as if the air had been pulled from the room. That was faster than I expected. Not shock, not concern, expectation. Caroline didn't speak for a moment. Neither did I, because there was nothing to say that could soften what that meant. Why are you telling me this now? I asked finally, my voice quiet but steady. Lily lifted her head. Because I heard what he said to you at the cemetery, she said, and I realized this isn't over for him. She glanced toward the window as if expecting him to appear at any moment. He's still trying to take everything, she continued. And if what happened to Daniel wasn't an accident? She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Caroline stepped in carefully. Lily, what you're describing is serious, she said. If this becomes part of a formal investigation, you may be asked to repeat all of this under oath. Lily nodded slowly. I understand. And your father will know, Caroline added. There's no way around that. Lily's hands tightened together. I know, she said again. I studied her for a moment. This wasn't easy for her. She was choosing between blood and truth, between fear and conscience. I knew something about that now. Are you sure? I asked softly. She met my eyes, and for the first time since she walked through my door, there was something steady in her expression. Yes, she said. I nodded. Then I looked down at the notebook again, at Daniel's final line. If I can't fix this, Marjorie needs to be protected. He had tried. God knows he had tried. But now the truth was no longer buried in a drawer. It was sitting in my kitchen, speaking and pointing in one direction, toward the man who had stood at my husband's grave and told me I didn't belong. By the next morning, the story had already begun to turn against me. That's how small towns work. News doesn't travel in straight lines. It spreads in quiet circles, picking up tone, judgment, and distortion as it goes. By the time it reaches you, it's no longer what happened. It's what people have decided must have happened. I first noticed it when I stepped onto my front porch. Mrs. Ellington from across the street was watering her flowers. She had known me for 20 years. We'd shared recipes, sat side by side at church, even cried together when her husband passed 5 years ago. That morning, she didn't wave. She glanced up once, then quickly looked back down her hands, suddenly very busy with the hose. It shouldn't have hurt, but it did. Inside, I told myself it didn't matter, that people didn't know the truth yet, that once everything came out, things would settle. But the phone call that came an hour later told me just how far things had already gone. "Mrs. Barrett," the voice said. "This is Pastor Elaine." My chest tightened slightly. "Pastor," I said, trying to keep my tone steady, "I wanted to check in on you," she said gently. "And also, to let you know, there have been some concerns raised within the community." There it was. Concerns. "What kind of concerns?" I asked. A pause. Then carefully, "There's been talk that Daniel may have been under pressure in his final months, that there were disagreements regarding finances." I closed my eyes briefly, and I asked, "And some people believe," she continued, "that you may have been involved in those pressures." The words landed harder than anything Victor had said at the cemetery, because this was quieter, more polite, but just as damaging. "That's not true," I said. "I understand," she replied quickly. "I'm not saying it is. I'm just telling you what's being said." "What else?" I asked. Another pause. "That you may have influenced decisions about the estate," she said, "and that Victor has been trying to ensure everything is handled fairly." Fairly. I almost laughed, but it came out as something closer to a broken breath. "Thank you for telling me," I said. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time staring at nothing. Victor hadn't just been preparing documents. He had been preparing the narrative, painting me as unstable, as manipulative, as someone who needed to be controlled. And in a place like this, where reputation mattered almost as much as truth, that kind of story could take hold quickly. Caroline arrived shortly after. One look at my face and she knew something had changed. "What happened?" she asked. I told her about the call, about the rumors, about the way Mrs. Ellington had looked at me, or rather hadn't. Caroline listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "I expected this," she said. "You did?" I asked, surprised. "Yes," she replied. "When someone moves aggressively on assets like this, they rarely rely on paperwork alone. They shape perception. It makes everything else easier. So he's turning people against me," I said. "He's trying to isolate you," she corrected gently. "If you look unstable, emotional, or dishonest, it strengthens his position and weakens yours." I leaned back in my chair, exhaustion washing over me again. "I've known these people for years," I said. "They've been in my home. They've sat at my table. And now they're hearing a different version of you," Caroline said. "One they weren't prepared for. People tend to fill in gaps with whatever story reaches them first." Silence settled between us. Then she reached into her folder. "There's more," she said. My stomach tightened. She placed a document in front of me. "This was filed this morning," she continued. I looked down. It was a will. Or at least, something claiming to be. Daniel's name was printed at the top. Victor Barrett was listed as executor, primary decision-maker over assets, control over property. My name was there too, but not where it should have been. Not as his wife, not as his partner, just a beneficiary with limited rights. "This isn't real," I said immediately. "I agree," Caroline replied. But it's been submitted for review, which means we have to challenge it formally. I stared at the page. The language felt wrong, cold, legal, detached in a way Daniel never was. He wouldn't write like this, I said. No, she agreed. He wouldn't. And the signature needs to be examined, she said. But based on what we've already seen, I have strong doubts. I let out a slow breath. This is what he tried to get me to sign at the funeral home, isn't it? Very likely, Caroline said. I looked back at the document, at Victor's name, at the way everything had been arranged to place him at the center of Daniel's life. After Daniel was gone. He was counting on me being too broken to fight, I said. Yes, Caroline replied, and now that I'm not, he's accelerating, she finished. That made sense. The speed, the rumors, the sudden appearance of this will. He wasn't just moving forward, he was rushing. Why, I asked. Caroline studied me for a moment. Because there's something he wants to secure before it becomes impossible, she said. The land, I guessed. Part of it, she said. But not all. What do you mean? She pulled out another set of papers. These are preliminary development filings, she explained. Nothing public yet, but far enough along to matter. I scanned the pages. Zoning changes, commercial interest, projected value increases. Then I saw it. The map, and the section highlighted in red. That's our property, I said. Yes, she confirmed. My pulse quickened. But it's just land, I said. We talked about selling it one day, but it's not just land anymore, she said. It sits directly adjacent to a planned commercial expansion. If this goes through, the value increases significantly. How much? Enough to change everything, she said. I leaned back, the weight of it settling in. So that was it. Not pride, not family legacy. Money. A lot of it. He knew. I said slowly. Daniel knew. Yes, Caroline said, and he refused to hand it over, which meant Victor had something to gain and something to lose. I thought about Lily's words, about the dinner, about the glass, about the way Victor had watched Daniel that night. A cold realization began to form. If Daniel was the only thing standing between Victor and that land, I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to. Caroline's silence said everything. I looked down at the will again, at the careful construction of a version of reality where I had no real power, where everything flowed through Victor, where I was reduced to a footnote in my own life. He's trying to erase me, I said. He's trying to control the outcome, Caroline corrected. I met her eyes. I won't let him, I said. The words felt different this time. Not reactive, not emotional, decided. She gave a small nod. Then we move forward, she said. Outside, I could hear a car passing slowly, too slowly. I turned my head slightly instinctively. Caroline noticed. What is it? I don't know, I said. It just feels like... I trailed off. Like we weren't alone in this anymore. Like something had shifted again. And this time it wasn't just about documents, or rumors, or land. It was about a truth that was getting closer to the surface, and a man who would do anything to keep it buried. By the time we walked into the conference room at the county courthouse 2 days later, I had learned something I never expected at this stage of my life. Grief can quiet you, but truth, real truth, can steady you. I wasn't the same woman who had stood frozen beside Daniel's casket while Victor told me to leave. I still felt the loss. God, I felt it in every breath I took. But I wasn't drifting anymore. I was standing. And for the first time since Daniel died, I wasn't standing alone. Caroline sat beside me, her folder neatly arranged, every document placed with deliberate precision. Across from us sat Victor. He looked exactly as he always had, controlled, composed, dressed in a dark suit that seemed almost too perfect for a man who had just buried his brother days ago. But now that I knew what I knew, I could see the cracks. Small. Subtle. But there, to his right sat his attorney, a man I didn't recognize. Younger than Victor, but carrying that same polished confidence people wore when they believed they had already won. "This is a preliminary review," the clerk announced. "No final determinations will be made today." Victor nodded slightly as if this was all just a formality. Caroline leaned toward me, her voice low. "This is where we slow him down," she said. "Not where we finish him." I nodded. I understood. Victor's attorney spoke first. They presented the will, calmly, methodically, as if there was nothing unusual about it. "This document reflects the decedent's final wishes," he said, sliding copies forward. "It establishes Mr. Victor Barrett as executor and outlines the distribution of assets in accordance with long-standing family intentions." Family intentions. The phrase made my stomach tighten. Caroline didn't interrupt. She let him finish. Then she spoke. "We formally contest the validity of this document," she said. No hesitation, no emotion, just clarity. "On what grounds?" the attorney asked. "Multiple," she replied, "including but not limited to concerns regarding signature authenticity, procedural irregularities, and evidence suggesting coercion or misrepresentation." Victor's gaze shifted to me then, not openly hostile, but sharp, measuring, as if he were trying to determine exactly how much I knew. I didn't look away. For the first time I held his gaze, and something passed between us. Not words. Understanding. He knew I wasn't the same woman he had planned for. Caroline continued. "We are requesting immediate suspension of any asset transfer actions pending full review," she said. "Additionally, we are submitting documentation for forensic examination of the signature in question." The clerk nodded, making notes. Victor's attorney leaned back slightly. "That seems unnecessary," he said. "There is no credible reason to doubt the authenticity of the document." Caroline turned her head just enough to meet his eyes. "There is," she said. And then she placed a file on the table. Inside were copies of the signatures we had already seen. The ones that didn't quite match. The ones that felt wrong in ways I couldn't explain, but now didn't have to. "We have preliminary comparisons," she said. "Significant inconsistencies in pressure formation and spacing." The attorney's expression didn't change, but Victor's did. Just slightly. A tightening at the jaw, a stillness in his shoulders. Caroline wasn't finished. "We also have reason to believe that attempts were made to obtain Mrs. Barrett's signature under compromised conditions," she added. Victor's head snapped slightly in her direction. "That's an accusation," his attorney said quickly. "It's a statement supported by witness accounts," Caroline replied calmly. I felt something shift in the room, not dramatically, but enough. Enough for the clerk to sit up a little straighter. Enough for the confidence on the other side of the table to lose a fraction of its certainty. Victor leaned forward then, finally speaking. "Marjorie," he said, his tone measured, almost gentle. "You don't understand what you're getting pulled into." There it was, the voice I had heard for years. Controlled, patient, condensing everything into something that sounded reasonable. "I understand more than you think," I replied. His eyes flickered. "Just for a second." "You're grieving," he said. "You're being influenced." By evidence, I asked. Silence. Brief, but real. Caroline stepped in before he could recover. We are also requesting access to financial records and transaction histories for the past 12 months, she said. That's excessive, his attorney said. It's necessary, she replied. The clerk nodded again. Request noted. The room settled into a tense quiet. This wasn't a victory, not yet. But it wasn't a loss either. It was something in between, something that shifted the balance, and Victor felt it. I could see it now, in the way his fingers rested just a little too still on the table, in the way his eyes moved not confidently but calculatingly, adjusting, reassessing, because for the first time, his plan had resistance. As the meeting wrapped, the clerk confirmed that the will would be held under review. No transfers, no decisions. Not yet. We stood. Victor stood too. For a moment, it felt like the room emptied around us, like it was just the two of us again, not at a grave this time, but still standing on opposite sides of something final. You should have taken the chance I gave you, he said quietly. I didn't ask what he meant. I already knew. The cemetery. The moment he told me to leave. I held his gaze. I'm still here, I said. Something cold passed through his expression. Not anger. Something worse. Certainty. Then he turned and walked away. Caroline touched my arm lightly. That went well, she said. Well, I repeated. We slowed him down, she said, and we established doubt. That matters. I nodded, but something inside me wasn't settled. Caroline, I said quietly. She looked at me. This isn't just about the will anymore, I said. She didn't respond right away, because she knew. She had known for a while, but saying it out loud made it real. No, she said finally. It isn't. I thought about Lily, about the dinner, about the glass, about the notebook, about Daniel's final entry. If I can't fix this. I looked down at my hands. Steady now. Stronger than they had been just days ago. I think he was already trying to, I said. Caroline's voice was calm, and now we continue where he couldn't. We walked out of the courthouse together. The sunlight felt different on my face. Not warm, not comforting, but clear, unforgiving, revealing. And as I stepped onto the street, one thought settled into place with absolute certainty. Victor hadn't lost. Not yet. But he had made one critical mistake. He had believed I wouldn't fight. And now everything was about to change. Lily disappeared 2 days after the hearing. At first I told myself it was nothing. She had been shaken. Anyone would be after saying what she said in my kitchen. Maybe she needed space. Maybe she needed time to think about what she had just stepped into. But by the second day, something inside me began to tighten again. By the third, I couldn't ignore it anymore. She's not answering. Caroline asked, her voice steady but focused. I shook my head, holding my phone in both hands like it might somehow give me a different answer if I looked at it long enough. No calls, no texts. Straight to voicemail. Caroline didn't react immediately. She stepped toward the window, scanning the street outside the same way she always did now, like she was measuring risk in silence. When was the last time you heard from her? She asked. Right after she left here, I said. She texted me that she made it home, that she was okay, and since then, nothing. Caroline turned back to me. That's not good, she said plainly. My stomach dropped. You think I couldn't finish the sentence? I think Victor understands the situation he's in, she said carefully, and I think he's not going to sit still while it unravels. I pressed my lips together, trying to keep my thoughts from spiraling. She's his daughter, I said. He wouldn't. Caroline didn't interrupt, but she didn't agree either. That doesn't guarantee anything, she said quietly. Silence filled the room again, the kind that felt heavier every second it stayed. I should go to her, I said suddenly. No, Caroline said immediately. I looked up at her, surprised by the firmness in her voice. That's exactly what we don't do, she said. We don't move without knowing what we're walking into. She came to me, I said. She trusted me. And now we make sure that trust doesn't put you at risk, Caroline replied. I hated that she was right. But she was. Always. She picked up her phone. I'm going to reach out through another channel, she said. Something less obvious. What does that mean? It means if Victor is watching her, we don't want him knowing we're looking, she said. That thought alone sent a chill through me. Watching her. Monitoring her. My mind went back to the dinner, to the way Lily had described him. Controlled. Precise. Patient. I sat down slowly, the weight of it pressing in again. How did I not see any of this? I whispered. Caroline didn't answer that one, because there wasn't an answer that would make it better. The hours that followed stretched longer than anything I had lived through since Daniel died. I tried to stay still, tried to trust that Caroline knew what she was doing, but every minute that passed without news felt like something slipping further out of reach. By late afternoon, the silence broke. Caroline's phone buzzed once. She looked at it. Then again. Her expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough. What is it? I asked, already standing. She reached out. Caroline said. My breath caught. Where is she? Not here, she said. She's in a motel just outside town. Is she safe? I asked. Caroline hesitated. She says she is, she replied, but she sounded rushed. That was enough. We're going, I said. Caroline didn't argue this time, because she knew. We didn't have a choice. The drive felt longer than it should have been. Every passing car made me tense. Every red light felt like something standing between us and the truth. When we finally pulled into the motel lot, it looked exactly like the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found. Faded sign, half-empty parking lot, curtains drawn tight behind every window. Caroline parked near the edge. Stay close, she said. I nodded. We walked to the room number Lily had sent. Caroline knocked. Once. Then again. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the door opened just a crack. Lily's face appeared, pale, eyes red, but alert. When she saw me, something in her expression softened just slightly. You came, she said. Of course I did, I replied. She opened the door wider. We stepped inside. The room was small, simple. But what stood out wasn't the space. It was the tension, like the air itself was holding something back. Lily closed the door quickly behind us. I couldn't stay at home, she said immediately. He knows something's wrong. What happened? Caroline asked. Lily took a shaky breath. I think he's been going through my things, she said. My phone. My laptop. I can't prove it, but things feel different. Like someone's been there. My chest tightened. Did he say anything I asked? No, she said. That's what makes it worse. He's acting normal. Of course he was. Victor didn't show his hand unless he had to. I didn't want to risk calling, she continued. I didn't know who might be listening. Caroline nodded. You did the right thing, she said. Lily looked at me then. I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, she said. Tell me what I asked. She hesitated, then moved toward the small desk in the corner of the room. She picked up a device. Small. Black. Familiar. A hard drive, I asked. She nodded. It's from the house, she said. The security system. Caroline stepped closer. You have access to that, she asked. Dad doesn't think I do, Lily said. He forgot I helped set it up when the system was installed. My pulse quickened, and Lily swallowed. There's footage, she said. The rooms seemed to shrink around us. Of what I asked. Her eyes met mine. Of the kitchen, she said. My breath caught. The night Daniel was there, everything inside me went still. You're sure Caroline asked? Lily nodded. I checked before I left, she said. I downloaded it. I didn't want to risk it disappearing. Caroline's voice shifted sharper now. Show me. Lily plugged the drive into her laptop. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled up the file. For a moment the screen was blank. Then the kitchen appeared. Victor's kitchen. Clear. Unmistakable. There he was, standing at the counter, 3 glasses in front of him. Time stamped. Precise. We watched in silence. He reached for one glass, paused, then moved it aside, his back turned just enough to obscure part of the motion, but not all, not enough, because even from that angle it was clear. He was doing something deliberate, something separate from the rest. My heart pounded in my chest. Pause it, Caroline said. Lily did. Caroline leaned closer, studying the frame. Then she straightened. This changes everything, she said. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Because this wasn't suspicion anymore. It wasn't memory. It wasn't doubt. It was real, visible, recorded. Victor had been careful, but not careful enough. Lily looked at me. I couldn't keep it to myself anymore, she said. I nodded slowly. You did the right thing, I said, and for the first time since this all began. I knew something with certainty. Victor still thought he was in control, but now we had something he couldn't talk his way out of. The courthouse hallway smelled faintly of polish and paper clean, controlled nothing like the chaos that had brought us there. Sunlight cut across the tiled floor in long, narrow strips, and for a moment I found myself watching the way it moved as if time itself could be measured in inches of light. Caroline stood beside me, calm as ever, her folder held close to her side. Inside it now was something far heavier than legal documents, proof, not complete, not absolute, but enough to change the direction of everything. Lily sat a few chairs down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She hadn't spoken much since we left the motel. I didn't blame her. The weight of what she carried would silence anyone. You're doing the right thing, I said quietly. She looked up at me. I hope so. She replied. Hope. That word felt fragile here. A door down the hall opened, and then Victor stepped out. For a split second, everything else faded. The hallway, the light, the people moving around us. It all narrowed to him. He looked the same, controlled, immaculate, untouched by anything that had happened. But when his eyes landed on me, something shifted. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for me. He hadn't expected me to be here like this. Not standing, not steady, and definitely not with Lily. His gaze flicked toward her. Just for a second. But it was enough. Lily stiffened beside me. Caroline leaned slightly closer. "Stay where you are," she murmured. Victor walked toward us, slowly, deliberately, every step measured. "Marjorie," he said when he stopped in front of me. No warmth, no sympathy, just control. "You've made this more complicated than it needed to be." The words were quiet, but they carried something sharp underneath. "I think you did that yourself," I replied. His jaw tightened just slightly, then his attention shifted to Lily. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Lily didn't answer. Her hands tightened further. "Go home," he continued. "We'll talk about this there." Something in his tone changed on that last word. Subtle, but unmistakable. A warning. Caroline stepped forward. "She's exactly where she needs to be," she said. Victor's eyes moved to her. Measured. Cold. "You're inserting yourself into something you don't understand," he said. "I understand enough," she replied calmly. He studied her for a moment, then looked back at me. "You're being manipulated," he said. "You always were too trusting, Marjorie." That was Daniel's mistake as well. The mention of Daniel felt like a spark against dry wood. "He trusted you," I said quietly. "And look where that got him." Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Victor didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was lower, more controlled. "You don't know what you're implying," he said. I held his gaze. "I think I do." For a moment, something almost broke through. Not guilt, not regret, but irritation. Like I had stepped out of the role he had written for me. "You had a chance," he said quietly. "At the cemetery." There it was again. The same line. The same moment. "You told me to leave," I said. "I gave you an opportunity," he corrected. "To walk away before things became unpleasant." The word lingered. Unpleasant. As if everything that had already happened wasn't enough. I felt something inside me settle. Not rise. Not explode. Just settle. "You should have told Daniel that," I said. Victor's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. Something colder. "Daniel made his choices," he said. "And you made yours," I replied. A door opened behind him. A clerk stepped into the hallway. "We're ready," she said. Victor didn't move immediately. His eyes stayed on mine. For a long second, it felt like we were standing at the edge of something final. Then he stepped back, straightened his jacket, and walked past us. Like none of this mattered, like he still believed he was in control. Caroline exhaled slowly beside me. "That was telling," she said. "What part?" I asked. "All of it," she replied, "but especially that. That what Lily asked quietly. That he's not trying to hide anymore," Caroline said. "Not from you." I looked down the hallway, at the door he had just walked through. "He thinks he's still ahead," I said. Caroline nodded. "Then let's change that." Inside the room felt colder than it had 2 days before. More formal, more rigid, like something had shifted in the air itself. Victor sat at the opposite table, his attorney beside him. "We took our places." Caroline set her folder down, slowly, deliberately. The clerk began speaking, outlining the purpose of the session. Procedural, measured, but underneath it all, tension, thick and rising. Victor's attorney started again, repeating much of what had already been said, reinforcing the validity of the will, framing everything as orderly, expected, controlled. Caroline waited. She let him speak, let him build his version of reality. Then she stood. "We have additional material to submit," she said. Victor's head lifted slightly. Just a fraction. But enough. Caroline opened the folder, removed a small drive, set it on the table. This was obtained from a private residential security system, she said. It contains footage from the evening in question. The room stilled. Victor's attorney frowned. "What evening?" he asked. Caroline didn't look at him. She looked at the clerk. The evening Mr. Daniel Barrett was last seen in the home of Victor Barrett. The words landed clean, precise. No room for interpretation. Victor didn't move. But I saw it. That flicker again. Smaller this time, but sharper. "You're suggesting," his attorney began. "I'm presenting," Caroline interrupted. The clerk nodded. "Proceed." Caroline connected the drive. The screen lit up, and then the kitchen appeared. Victor's kitchen, clear, undeniable. The footage played. No commentary, no explanation, just movement. Victor at the counter. 3 glasses, the pause, the shift, the moment. Small, but impossible to ignore. The room stayed silent. Even after the video stopped. Even after the screen went dark. Victor's attorney leaned forward. "That proves nothing," he said quickly. "There's no clear indication of it establishes opportunity," Caroline said. "And intent will be examined alongside supporting evidence." Victor finally spoke. His voice was calm. Too calm. "You're reaching," he said. Caroline met his gaze. "No," she replied. "We're just beginning." The clerk cleared her throat. "This material will be entered for review," she said. "Further investigation may be warranted." May be. But we all knew. Something had shifted. Something real. Victor leaned back in his chair. For the first time, he didn't look entirely certain. And as I sat there, my hands steady in my lap, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to feel until that moment. He wasn't untouchable. Not anymore. The day of the full hearing arrived with a kind of stillness that didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the air was holding its breath. Savannah was quiet that morning. The streets outside the courthouse looked the same as always, but nothing inside me felt ordinary anymore. I had learned in a matter of days how quickly a life could split open, how fast trust could turn into evidence, and how heavy truth becomes when it finally surfaces. Caroline met me at the courthouse steps. "You ready?" she asked. No one had ever asked me that question about something like this before. Not in all my years, not in my marriage, not in my life. I thought about Daniel, about the notebook, about his last line. If I can't fix this, Marjorie needs to be protected. I nodded. Yes, I said. And for once, I meant it. Inside the courtroom felt different from the smaller hearing room we had been in before. This was larger, more formal, the kind of space where decisions didn't just shift things, they ended them. Victor was already seated. Of course he was. Always early, always prepared. His expression was the same as ever, controlled, composed, but there was something missing now. Not confidence, not exactly, but certainty. He no longer looked like a man who knew how this would end. That mattered. Caroline took her place beside me, laying out her documents with practiced precision. Lily sat behind us this time, closer to the back, but still within view. She gave me a small nod. I returned it. The proceedings began. Victor's attorney opened first. He moved through his arguments methodically, reinforcing the same narrative we had heard before. The will was valid. The transfers were legitimate. Victor was acting in accordance with family expectations. He spoke with confidence, but now it felt rehearsed, rigid, like a script that no longer matched the scene. Caroline waited. She didn't interrupt. She let the argument reach its full length. And then she stood. "Your Honor," she began, "we will demonstrate that the document presented as Mr. Daniel Barrett's final will is not only invalid, but part of a coordinated effort to assume control over his estate through misrepresentation, coercion, and fraudulent execution." The words echoed slightly in the room. Clear, sharp, unavoidable. Victor didn't react, but I saw the tightening in his jaw. Caroline continued, "We will also present evidence that raises serious concerns regarding the circumstances surrounding Mr. Barrett's final days." A ripple moved through the room, small, but real. Because now this wasn't just about paperwork. Now it was about something far more dangerous. She called the first expert, a forensic document examiner. He spoke in precise terms, technical, detailed, but the meaning was unmistakable. The signatures on the submitted will, he explained, exhibit multiple inconsistencies when compared to verified samples of Mr. Barrett's handwriting. He pointed to specifics: pressure differences, letter spacing irregularities, inconsistent stroke formation. These variations suggest that the signature was not produced under normal conditions, he concluded. Victor's attorney stood quickly. People's handwriting changes, he argued, especially under stress. The examiner nodded slightly. "That is true," he said, "but these deviations are not consistent with stress variation. They are consistent with imitation." The word hung in the air. Imitation. Fake. Victor remained still, but his fingers pressed lightly against the table. Caroline called the next witness, a representative from the bank. Records were presented, transactions flagged, movements that didn't align with Daniel's established patterns, questions raised, doubts layered carefully one on top of the other. Then Caroline paused, just long enough to shift the weight of the room, and then she said, "We call Lily Barrett." My heart tightened. Lily stood slowly. Every step she took felt like it carried something heavier than her own body. She took the stand, swore the oath, and then sat. Caroline approached her carefully. "Please state your name," she said. "Lily Barrett," she replied, her voice quiet but steady. "And your relationship to Mr. Victor Barrett?" "He's my father." The room seemed to still. Caroline nodded. "Lily, do you recall the evening Mr. Daniel Barrett came to your home for dinner?" "Yes." "Can you describe what you observed?" There was a pause, a long one. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the weight of what she was about to say. Then she spoke. She described the dinner, the setup, the drinks, the moment in the kitchen, the movement of the glass. Her voice shook once, then steadied. She didn't rush. She didn't embellish. She just told the truth. Victor's attorney stood. "Miss Barrett, he said you're making serious accusations about your own father. Are you certain of what you saw?" "Yes," she said. "Is it possible you misunderstood?" "No." "Is it possible you're being influenced?" Lily looked at him. Then slowly, she shook her head. "No." The word was quiet, but it didn't move. Caroline didn't need to ask anything further. because the next piece spoke louder than anything else. The video. It played again, this time in the courtroom. Larger, clearer, unavoidable. Victor at the counter, the glasses, the pause, the movement. No explanation, no excuse. Just reality. When it ended, the silence was different from before. Heavier. Final. Victor's attorney tried to recover. "This is circumstantial," he said. "There's no direct evidence of wrongdoing." But his voice lacked conviction now, because everyone in the room had seen it, felt it, understood it. Caroline stepped forward one last time. Taken individually, she said each piece may raise questions, but together she paused. Let the weight settle. They establish a pattern, a deliberate effort to manipulate, misrepresent, and ultimately control the estate of a man who resisted those actions. The judge listened, watched, considered, then spoke. "The document submitted as the final will of Mr. Daniel Barrett is hereby deemed invalid pending further investigation." My breath caught. "The court recognizes sufficient cause to suspend all related transfers and restore provisional control of the estate to Mrs. Marjorie Barrett." The words echoed, louder than anything that had come before. Because this time, they weren't arguments. They were decisions. Victor didn't move, didn't react, not immediately. But as we stood, as the room began to shift and voices rose again, I saw it. Not anger, not outrage, but something far more telling. He had lost control. Not completely, not yet, but enough. Enough for everything to start unraveling. And as I stepped out of that courtroom, sunlight hitting my face again, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to believe until that moment. This wasn't just about winning. It was about taking back something that had been stolen long before Daniel died, his truth, his voice, and now mine. The house was quiet again. Not the empty kind of quiet that had swallowed me in the days after Daniel died, but a different kind. One that held something softer beneath it, something that didn't press in on my chest quite as hard. For the first time since everything began, I was alone by choice. Caroline had left an hour earlier. The court ruling had bought us time, real time. The will was suspended, the transfers halted, and Victor no longer had the immediate control he'd been so certain of. But she had told me something before she walked out the door. "There's one thing left," she said, "and I think you should read it when you're ready." She handed me a sealed envelope. I didn't need to ask whose handwriting it was. I knew. I had been sitting at the kitchen table ever since. The envelope lay in front of me untouched. It was strange. I had been chasing answers for days, desperate to understand what Daniel had been hiding, what he had been trying to fix. And now that the final piece was in front of me, I was afraid to open it. Because this wasn't evidence. This wasn't strategy. This was him. The last words he had chosen to leave behind. The last version of his voice I would ever hear. I ran my fingers lightly across the paper. Marjorie, it said on the front. Just my name, the way he always wrote it. Carefully, like it mattered. I took a slow breath. Then I opened it. The paper inside was folded once. I unfolded it carefully, my hands steadier than I expected. And then I read. "Marjorie, if you're reading this, then I didn't finish what I started." My vision blurred for a moment. I blinked hard and kept going. "I've gone over 100 times how to tell you all of this, and every time I thought I had the right words, I lost them. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I was ashamed. I felt something tighten in my chest, ashamed I let things go too far before I admitted what was happening. Victor has always been strong-willed. You know that. I spent my whole life learning how to work around him instead of standing up to him. And when it came to this, I thought I could handle it the same way. I could almost hear his voice as I read. Low, measured, honest in the way he rarely allowed himself to be out loud. I was wrong. The words hit harder than anything else so far. He started pushing about the land first, said it should stay in the family. I didn't think much of it at the time. We've had disagreements before. But then it changed. He stopped asking, started expecting, and when I didn't give him what he wanted, he started looking for other ways. My grip on the paper tightened slightly. I should have told you then. I should have sat you down and said everything clearly, but I kept thinking I could fix it before it ever reached you. There it was again. That word. Fix. Daniel had always been the one who fixed things. Except this time, he couldn't. I saw the way he looked at you when you weren't paying attention. Like you were something in the way. A tear slipped down before I could stop it. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. My breathing slowed, each word pulling me deeper into something I hadn't allowed myself to feel yet. I started moving things quietly. Copies, records, safeguards. I reached out for help. I didn't want him to know how much I understood, because once he knew, I wasn't sure how far he'd go. The room felt smaller, closer. That night at his house, I had a feeling something wasn't right. I can't prove it. Maybe I never will. But I knew enough to be careful. My heart pounded. He had known. Not everything, but enough. If I'm gone because my body gave out, then that's something I can accept. But if I'm gone because I waited too long to act, the sentence stopped there. No ending, no resolution, just the weight of what he couldn't say. I swallowed hard and continued. Then I'm sorry. The word cut deeper than anything else. Sorry. For something that was never meant to be his burden alone. I should have trusted you with this. You've always been stronger than I gave you credit for. A soft, broken breath escaped me. He knew. Even if he said it too late. If you're reading this, then it means you're already in the middle of it, and I hate that more than anything. But I also know you, and I know you won't back down once you understand the truth. That part made something shift inside me. Not pain. Something else. Recognition. You don't have to fight for everything we built. You just have to not let anyone take it from you. The words settled into me slowly. Not a command. Not pressure. Just belief. And Marjorie. I paused. Just for a second. Because I knew the next part would hurt. None of this was ever because I didn't love you enough to tell you. It was because I loved you enough to try and carry it myself. Tears blurred the page again, but I didn't stop reading. That was my mistake. A long silence filled the room as I held the letter. The last line waited. Final. Unavoidable. Don't let my silence become your burden. Live your life without fear. I love you. Daniel. I lowered the paper slowly. The house was still quiet, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of him, of everything he had tried to say, everything he had carried, everything he had failed to finish, and everything he had trusted me to continue. I sat there for a long time, not crying, not breaking, just breathing, letting it settle, letting it become part of me. Daniel hadn't betrayed me. He hadn't hidden things because he didn't care. He had hidden them because he believed wrongly that he had to protect me by keeping me out of it. And in doing that, he had stepped into something alone, something that had taken him from me. But he hadn't left me unprepared. Not completely. He had left me the truth. And now I understood what I had to do. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of something deeper, something steadier. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back into the envelope, and held it against my chest. "I'm still here, Daniel," I whispered into the quiet. And this time I wasn't saying it through grief. I was saying it with strength. It took me a long time to return to the cemetery. Not because I was afraid of the place, but because I needed to become someone different before I stood there again. The first time I had been there, I was barely holding myself together, shaken, humiliated, pushed aside in front of strangers, and told I didn't belong beside the man I had spent more than half my life loving. I had left that day feeling like something had been taken from me. Now, months later, I was coming back to take it back. The morning was quiet. Savannah in early fall had a softness to it, cooler air, slower light, the kind that made everything feel a little more grounded. I drove myself this time. No one sitting beside me. No one guiding me. Just me. That mattered. The gravel path crunched under my shoes as I stepped out of the car. The sound echoed lightly in the stillness, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten for a brief moment. I walked slowly, not because I was unsure, but because I didn't need to rush anymore. Daniel's grave came into view exactly where I remembered it. Simple, clean, unchanged. The headstone had been set properly now, his name carved into it in clear, steady lines. Daniel Barrett. Below it, the dates. And beneath that, beloved husband. I stopped a few feet away. For a moment, I just stood there, letting everything settle, letting the past and the present meet in one place. "I didn't leave," I said quietly. My voice didn't shake. It surprised me. "I know he told me to," I added, thinking of Victor. "I know that was the plan." The memory of that moment returned, his voice low and dismissive, telling me to walk away, to step out, to disappear. I stepped closer to the grave. "But I stayed," I said. And this time, there was no doubt in it, no hesitation. Just truth. A soft breeze moved through the trees above me, carrying that familiar rustle of leaves that always reminded Daniel of early mornings on job sites. He used to say you could tell how the day would go by the way the wind sounded through the branches. "Things are different now," I continued. I reached down and brushed a few stray leaves away from the base of the stone. Not because they needed to be moved, but because I could, because I was here, because no one was stopping me. I kept the house I said. I didn't let him take it. A small pause. And the land. That part had taken longer, more paperwork, more pressure. But in the end, the decision had been mine. I hadn't rushed, hadn't reacted. I had waited until everything was clear. Until I understood what Daniel had seen coming. "And I sold it," I said. The word felt strange at first. Final, but not wrong. On my terms. That mattered more than anything. The development had gone through just as Caroline predicted. The value had been more than either of us had imagined when we first bought it years ago. Back then, it had just been land. Possibility. Now it had become something else entirely. And I did something with it, I added. I let my hand rest lightly against the stone. Something you would have liked. That part had taken the most thought. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I wanted it to be right. The money could have made my life easier, simpler. But that wasn't what Daniel had built his life around. He built things that lasted, things that helped people stand on their own. So I followed that. There's a fund now, I said, for young workers, apprentices, people trying to build something from nothing. I smiled slightly. You'd recognize them. Same kind of people you always took in, the ones no one else had time for. The breeze shifted again, softer this time. I took a breath. Lily's doing better, I added. That part had been complicated. Not because I didn't want to help her, but because she had to choose her own way forward. She's in therapy, I said, staying with friends for now, working part-time. I paused. She testified. That had been one of the hardest days, not just for the case, but for her. Standing up in a room like that, facing the truth about her own father. I think she's going to be okay, I said quietly, and for the first time I believed it. I stepped back slightly, giving myself space to look at the whole picture. The grave, the name, the life it represented. I'm okay too, I said. That one took a moment longer to say, not because it wasn't true, but because it had taken time to become true. I didn't think I would be. I admitted. I thought I'd just exist after this, like something had been taken that I couldn't get back. I looked down at the ground, then back up. But it's not like that, I said. No one gets to decide whether I stay or go. Not anymore. Victor had learned that, the hard way. After the court rulings, the investigations had continued, slowly, carefully, piece by piece. I didn't follow every detail. I didn't need to. I knew enough to know that his control had slipped, that the version of the story he had tried to create no longer held, that the truth, Daniel's truth, had found its way out. And that was enough for me. I didn't fight him the way he expected, I said. I didn't try to outshout him or outplay him. I shook my head slightly. I just stayed. Stayed in the house. Stayed in the truth. Stayed long enough for everything he tried to hide to come to light. That was all it took, I said softly. The breeze moved again, brushing lightly against my face. I closed my eyes for a moment, let it settle, then opened them. I miss you, I said. That part hadn't changed. Wouldn't. Not now. Not ever. But I'm not lost anymore, I added. And that was the difference. I reached into my bag and took out the letter. The one I had read so many times I could recite parts of it without looking. I didn't unfold it. I just held it. You told me not to let your silence become my burden, I said. I didn't. I placed the envelope gently at the base of the stone, not as something to leave behind, but as something returned, something completed. I stayed, I said again, and the truth came with me. I stood there a little longer, not waiting, not hoping for something else, just present. Then finally I turned and walked back down the path. This time, not because someone told me to leave, but because I chose when to go. There are moments in life when the people closest to us become the ones who try to rewrite our place in the world. Sometimes it happens loudly through words, actions, confrontation. And sometimes it happens quietly through control, silence, and carefully shaped stories that make us question our own worth. What this journey taught me is something I wish I had understood sooner. Being pushed aside does not mean you no longer belong. Being underestimated does not mean you are weak. And being alone does not mean you are powerless. Marjorie's story is not just about loss. It's about what happens when truth is buried and the courage it takes to uncover it even when it hurts. It's about recognizing that love is not defined by how much you endure in silence, but by how much you are willing to stand in your own truth when it matters most. And perhaps most importantly, it's about understanding that it is never too late to reclaim your voice, never too late to draw a boundary, never too late to stand your ground and say, I am still here. If this story touched you in any way, I would truly love to hear from you. Have you ever felt like an outsider in your own family? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when no one expected you to? Share your story in the comments and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. And if stories about truth, resilience, and emotional strength speak to your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe. You're not alone.